everybody. Welcome to last week of Epoch. My name is Grim Reaper, and with me, as always,
Cynical Squid.
and this is last week of Epoch. I'd like to thank you guys for tuning in. We've got a very special episode for you. As you can see on the screen here with us, we have Boardman21, the man, the myth, the legend, the person who makes all of your build guides that you guys usually look at. How are you doing today, Boardman?
Oh, I'm doing great. How are you?
Doing well. So whenever it comes time for you to put together these videos, on average, not with the new ones because we've discussed this before, but the 1 to 75s, but beforehand, before you did the 1 to 75s, how much time on average would it take you to actually create a build guide for people to follow?
Uh, so the build guides have kind of grown over time. They started as pretty simple things that I usually recorded really quick. They took, 20, 30 minutes just to talk about it. And then I would even just download them from Twitch and throw them over to YouTube. But nowadays, even though I already usually have a character that's very high level that I respec and do what I need and maybe do a little farming with it or whatever I need to do to switch it. Maybe there's a couple of changes, a skill got reworked or something. Usually the gameplay doesn't take too long. But at this point, what takes the longest is setting up the loot filter, doing the written guide, editing the video together, trying to cover it. Especially when you become like a veteran player, it gets really hard to just kind of expect people to know exactly how things work. You kind of like, I'll catch myself saying, "Oh, yeah, I just do this the usual way," or I just go over the notes. But then I have to think like most people don't know why I choose that or how the interactions work. So I try to cover synergies and things like that. But overall, a normal build video with the written guide, the loot filter, everything usually just one day. I can usually get one rendered, uploaded, everything, all the thumbnails, everything for it, typically in 12 hours or less.
Holy cow, man! 12 hours or less is pretty good considering the fact it's taken me how long, Casey? What, like up to I want to say almost 72 hours at one point just to be able to do one podcast because of errors.
Look, he's been doing it a lot longer than you have. He's got some experience. He's got his process down, as it were. So we'll get there. We'll get there.
Yeah. So whenever you get done though and you upload the build guide, uh, does part of you ever watch your own videos and then say, "Oh, I made a mistake in my video," and you go back and fix that? Have you ever done that with yourself so far since being a content creator?
Oh yeah, it happens every now and then. I've switched computers twice since I've started last Epoch, and when that happens, and I have to re-download my software, I lose a lot of my templates, and there might be little things that I forget. Just recently, I accidentally left the music for a video at full blast, so people couldn't even hear me. So I had to take a video down, redo it, just edit the music in better. There's been a couple of videos that I've done before that have confused a mechanic or said something incorrectly. If it's a little thing, I typically will just put it in the description, like just ignore me at 5 minutes and 42 seconds, move on. It doesn't work like that. This is how it works. If it's something huge, something where I just completely got something wrong, usually yeah, I'll take the video down and re-upload it after I've edited a new version of that video with the correct info. Doesn't
And
happen too often, but there have been a couple.
and how long does that process take then whenever you have to re-upload and redo a video?
Typically it doesn't take too long. It usually just takes whatever it is that I need to do, 5, 10 minutes of re-recording, re-render the video for another half an hour, and then re-upload for another half an hour. So it doesn't take too long. But again, while you're rendering and while it's uploading, those are the times that I usually get the written guide, the loot filter. I get all that put together. So it's you kind of do them at the same time.
And are your written guides, because I haven't seen too many of your videos, I've seen a few but not too many of them, are your written guides linked with the videos? Is there like a button somebody can click to where they can go straight to a written version from your YouTube?
Oh yeah, if you go in the description of any video now, you have a link to the forum post, which is where the written guide is. You'll have
Okay.
a link to the build planner, the loot filter, the build compendium that we have that has all the content creators and their builds. There's basically a link to just about anything in there.
Okay, so everything's linked to the forums. Then you do also on the forums is where you put the physical copy at. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Awesome. Nice to know that. Casey, do you or Cynical Squid, do you have any questions you want to ask?
Yeah. So similar to what Graham just asked about going back and editing a video, the nature of a game like Last Epoch stuff's always going to change. You ever revisit a build you've already done a video for if maybe a skill gets reworked or like maybe like a passive tree change happens or something like that and it allows you to do something slightly different while using roughly the same build? Do you ever like revisit those for videos, or is that just something you're not really?
I will take a build, but I always try and change it enough to where it's like a whole new video. I hate making videos of the same thing over again. Typically because I'll get a question of like which one's better, and it's like, well, this one's updated, just go with it. And then they'll ask questions of like, well, this previous one did more damage, or it had more defense or something. So I try to just make it a whole new build over again. It might use 4 out of 5 of the same skills, or the skill trees will be slightly different, but typically I just update it. I don't typically go back to the written guide and rewrite it, just because most people are just looking for an updated patch. They want to see in the title that it's got the most recent patch number in it. And if it doesn't, even if it is updated, if I went back and changed the written guide and said, this updated, they'll still ask, well, is this still viable? Or, there'll be a million questions with it just because it's from last patch. So I just do a whole new video and update the filter and all that stuff for it.
Awesome. So when you're not actually playing Last Epoch, streaming, creating guides, and all the content that you put out, what do you normally like to do for fun, Boardman?
For fun, I'm pretty much into sports. That got killed a lot with COVID, but I like to go play basketball, pickup games at the local park. I got my daughter, and my girlfriend also has a couple of kids. We like to go to the arcade, go to the beach. We do live like right on the beach, so we go out there quite a bit. Um, I may be 30, but I act like a total kid when I'm around kids. So like I'll get in the sand, we'll be building sand castles. We'll go to I don't know the name of the bit off the top of my head, but we have a place where you jump on trampolines, indoor trampoline. I don't know if you guys, I don't remember what it's called. It's got a name, but we'll do that. I go crazy. I'll get into like doing the backflips, and I'm too big to like be on there. It can get embarrassing sometimes. Sometimes the kids don't want to be around me because they're just like, "What are you doing?" But it's all fun. But yeah.
I have 5 nieces and nephews, and I'm also the big kid who will absolutely embarrass them if we go anywhere in public if it involves doing something fun because I'm trying to do the fun stuff as well. So I sympathize with you.
I try not to embarrass my kids whenever we go out somewhere.
Well, see, the nieces and
We're
nephews aren't
ready to
my
do the
kids, so I can embarrass them. It's fine. They don't have to live with me. I just get to disappear after I embarrass them. I don't face any of the consequences.
As
I
long as
do
you're
though.
having fun, it's not embarrassing.
Exactly. Exactly.
Oh Jesus. So once the guide's done, everything's situated. Is there any other content that you work on the side that the Last Epoch community is not aware of? Do you do any other content for other places, or is it only Last Epoch, only Boardman?
Currently, I only do Last Epoch. It takes up all of my time. I don't even have enough time to do all of the Last Epoch content that I like to do. I don't know. You guys probably haven't seen all of my videos. There's a ton of them, but I've done ones where I review each skill individually and show like different ways to build it and like use it. Um, I have there's like 106 of those that I still haven't done. They take a few hours a piece to do, and every time a new patch comes out, you're already busy doing updated guides, leveling guides, all those things that take a massive amount of time. But besides those and just discussions, coming in and talking to other streamers, I get like Lizard and stuff on stream. It takes so much time. On top of having a full time job, like I can't do enough of the LE content that I would like to do. So yeah, there's nothing else that I do on the side.
So what do you do for a full time job then, if you don't mind me asking?
I work in a lumber mill as currently an electrician apprentice. Um,
Okay.
but yeah.
Nothing wrong with that, man. You make good money being an electrician. I had a buddy of mine that went to college over at the community college whenever I was going there for my associate's degree. And he got his in electrical work for electrician. He became an electrical apprentice himself. And I think his first job he was working for the government installing solar panels, making like over 6 grand every 2 weeks, coming home with fat paychecks. So there's money to be made in that. There's
Yeah.
nothing wrong with that at all. So got your build guide made, got everything uploaded, everything's done, you've checked it, everything's perfect, good to go. How do you go into the process of what you're going to create next for your next guide?
I've actually put a video out on this before. It's been a long time, but several things happen. Typically, while I'm playing the game, one of several things will happen. A unique will drop that has very interesting affixes, and I say I want to build around that. That would be cool in this character. I go do that. Other things that could happen, I could get an exalted item that has a plus level to like a skill or something. That's like, oh, that'll finish off this build that I'm working on the side. I'll go finish up that. Typically, the other things that I'll see is I'll just pick a skill that I haven't touched in a really long time. Some good ones is like Hungering Souls, like Ice Barrage, things that are like really underutilized, and I'll just go play with them for a few hours and see if there's something there. Sometimes when you play with a skill, especially like the first time or second time, you find you're like, man, this skill really sucks compared to another skill I was using. Like going to Ice Barrage from Elemental Nova, you're just like, that's garbage. I mean, that's your first thought. But if you take a break and you go play some other characters and you come back to it later, you build it a different way. You're like, wow, there is actually some damage here. There's a different way to build it, or I could use it, different synergy. You tend to find something that you overlooked before, and that's where a lot of the fun is in it.
Okay. Cynical, you got a question on your mind?
So, in addition to the build guides, you also mentioned the 1 to 70 series. What inspired you to start making that series in addition to?
Um, I don't remember exactly what made me start. I do know that I regret it now with how much time they take. But uh, um, I think what got me started was there's just no leveling guides out there, and everyone kept asking for them. And the main question I got was because most of my end game builds were end game characters, and everyone was like, "How do I level this?" So that's really what just inspired me to do one. So I gave one a shot. They used to be 1 to 50s. The problem with 1 to 50s was that was the moment that you just got out of the campaign, and everyone was like, "Well, you haven't even spec'd into the fifth skill, really. You only got a couple of points into it. Like they still needed more info." There were still 50 more passive points. So I was like, all right, we'll go to 75. By that point, you'll have 4 skills that are all level 19. You'll basically be set. I mean, you'll have the build put together, and from there you can either transition into another build of that mastery that you found online, or you can just continue on your own and just learn those synergies even better. But you have the foundation to where you should be able to do the content of the game.
Awesome. And how many hours have you put into Path of, or Last Epoch now?
Um, well, depending on who you ask, some hours count, some hours don't, because there's been a lot of AFK hours. But according to Steam, I think just over 11,500 at this point.
Holy crap.
And here, I thought it was getting bad because I hit 600 in 2 months or what. All right,
Lizard's like, I got 4,000 hours of you in Last Epoch, and here's Boardman with 11,000 hours.
Well, my played hours where I'm actually active, not like editing something on the side or talking to somebody. Like I'm actually in game playing, probably much closer to like Lizard's playtime. Like we're probably talking 4 or 5,000 actual like pushing
Played
buttons
hours.
played hours.
Okay, so out of that, he's got 6,000 hours of AFK time, and then roughly about 4 to 5,000 hours of actual play.
you know.
So once you get done with the 1 to 75s and you're done leveling, and I've noticed you do this a lot of times, you'll have questions in your chat whenever you're streaming. Is there been any questions that somebody has asked that has inspired you to make a guide for somebody just so they had it?
Sure. Absolutely. And there's always like again, when you're a veteran player and you played for a while, you kind of forget all the things that took you a while to learn or something that gave you problems. Especially since a lot of things that were problems back when I started don't even exist. The resistance and armors are now not percentage based. They're percentage, not flat amounts that give damage reduction, which is different. All the formulas have basically changed. Glancing blows no longer a mandatory stat on all builds. Like many things have changed, and so like I kind of forget that like these new things are learning curve for a lot of people. An example would be the most recently somebody came into my Discord and was asking about doing a video that covers what defenses you should go for first on characters, and it's a tough one to answer. Like you can say it's resistance, like cap your resistance first, get your critical strike avoidance, but after that, it's kind of a question like, well, it depends if you're going low life, what mastery you have, what synergies. Like if you're rogue, you obviously want dodge. So like that's already inspired me to do a video on it. I haven't done it yet, but that's one that I'm working on. It's just like where you should aim and then and show them like how it kind of depends on what class you're running because there's so many synergies inside the passive tree for you to synergize with and maximize your defense.
Okay, and going into the defenses, very quickly, if you can, for each class, what is the best defense for each one that you normally pick? Like, if you were to go Acolyte, what's the highest percentage of defense type that you would take for an Acolyte, highest percentage defense type you would take for Primalist, and so forth and so on?
Um, I would. That's a tough question. To word it, if I was a rogue, the main thing that I would go for rogue is obviously dodge. No matter what build I did, dodge would probably it's going to be in there. Trying to get at least 50% plus on a rogue character. Now you still want your resistance. You'd still want critical strike avoidance probably first, and then after that you could even get into glancing blow depending on what your build is. If you were wearing dual swords to get that bonus. But the other thing is you have a lot of glancing blow, like with the dust shroud, you get a lot more dodge and glancing blow. There's ways to build it to where you get a lot of damage reduction with that build, but dodge I think is the main characteristic that is something you would go for on that build. If you went to say the acolyte, acolyte's a very high leech class. Um, it there's a big difference between the necromancer and the lich, so I don't really want to say acolyte altogether. If I was playing a minion based build, I'd go for lots of ward. I would base it around Ripla, probably give me ward. You have the zombies now that can generate you a massive amount. So if I'm building into a minion style of necromancer, I'm gonna go zombies. I'm gonna go ward based. I might even go low life just so I get even a bigger generation of ward per second. If I'm lich, it's more like leech. Leech is going to be like the main thing that I build into. Lots of health, lots of leech. There's some other things that you can do, such as like aura decay healing you every second, reaper form for the extra life. But leech is a really big characteristic of the lich, while ward is going to be that really big bonus to the necromancer. Primalist in general, Primalist is just a big bulky dude. Not there's If I put all three of them together, I'd say for that class, the main thing you want to build into is like endurance, critical strike avoidance, cap your resistance, and then getting leech. So you have a form of replenishment for that life. But basically, you want as much damage reduction as you can get. Not many versions, if any version of low life, is really beneficial like super late game. Like there are some low life builds that work, but I would just like stay away from them on that class. Ward is not its biggest strong suit. Just the brunt force of having lots of HP and having lots of damage reduction. The mage, obviously, another ward class. You have flame ward. You have really good damage reduction on that class, and you have the ability, whether you're a spellblade or a sorcerer, to just generate massive amounts of ward. So and do really good damage at the same time. So that's where I would go with that. I'd really focus on getting ward retention, stacking lots of int, um, and then of course capping your resistance and getting your critical strike avoidance. If you decide to go high life with ward, obviously you might want some endurance as well. If you decide to wear Insanguius and Last Steps of the Living, go low life, endurance would be useless. And the Sentinel, geez, obviously the Sentinel is going to be based around armor. Armor is a huge thing, super easy to get on the Sentinel, so you're just gonna become a super tank with either shield throw, vengeance for the damage reduction, or use sigils for the flat armor gains that you can get. You can also stack block, which is really impressive for the Sentinel. Sentinel is one of the classes that can get that 100% block if you have like a tier 6 or tier 7 shield. And being able to get to that 100% block chance where you get health on block. With Holy Aura for the Paladin, you get that ward on block. You take a massive amount of damage reduction. You have the armor that can cap out an 85% really quickly, relatively easy for that class. And then there's still ways to put out good damage. But yeah, you still want capture resistance, critical strike avoidance, endurance on that class, but its best synergies are with block and with getting a huge amount of armor.
Awesome. Cynical, you got any questions to follow up on that?
So you mentioned a few individual classes just then. Is there like a favorite that you class deep more than the other?
Oh yeah. At the moment, I don't enjoy playing it so much more than the others. They kind of all get an equal amount of playtime, but Beastmaster is my favorite mastery based on its passive skill tree. Um, I've never gone into the passive tree and had enough points to take everything that I want. Like it has so many synergies with the aspects and things. Like I'm always like, man, I'm 10 points shy of where I really want to be with this. For gameplay and actual like thematically enjoying the build, I like the Sentinel class the most. With my favorite builds being both on the Void Knight with Void Smite and Devouring Orb and stuff, and then of course the Hammered on the Paladin always brings back the nostalgic T2 days. So those are my three main masteries that I like to play around with the most.
Awesome. Going back to the Hammered In, what do you like about the Hammered In so much then, besides the nostalgic D2 fill?
The best thing that I like about the hammer throw build is one, you got a huge AOE. Two, you have the hammers spinning around you, which is cool. But then three, the fact that they can call down the smites and you can have lightning or void, change the aspect of that skill. It just looks really cool. And it's really pleasing to have hammers spinning around you, hitting things, and at the same time smiting things, and just watching everything die around you. It's a fun playstyle. It's not super fast. It's not too slow. It's fun.
Since you've got a lot of experience playing in the game too, I have to ask this: what has been the most tankiest build you have ever done, and what has been the biggest glass cannon build that you've ever done? One where it's like if you get sneezed on, you know you're going to die, but as long as you sneeze first, you're going to clear the whole screen.
There's quite a few glass cannons. I think there's more glass cannons than there are pure tanks in the build, but I'd say the tankiest build that I've ever played would be a 100% block version, which it was built differently in a couple of patches ago, but a 100% block version of Shield Throw Paladin. Because you had just massive damage reduction, both if you took a hit or didn't, you couldn't be critically struck. You had your huge 85% damage reduction through armor, you had cap resist, you had the endurance, and then you had health being healed every time you ricocheted, you had armor being granted every time it ricocheted. The paladin is probably the easiest tank to make in the game. There are versions of like dancing strikes and wearing wings of Argentus that can make a rogue really tanky with the glancing blow and stuff like that. But I'd go with the paladin's probably the most tanky. As for the most glass cannon, I feel like a glass cannon every time I play the marksman class. Like I've just never been able to feel tanky as a marksman. But probably the most glass cannon that I've ever been was going into fights with the shurikens and not having any sort of like defense built into and having low life, but you did so much damage with them that if you touched an enemy before they hit you, they were dead. Like even bosses. But it was probably the most glass cannon I did was a non-glancing blow, non-dodge version of shurikens, but very high damage. It didn't do well in empowered.
Cynical, you got a question to ask?
Um, so in regards to, I guess, kind of more mastery class questions, I guess. We know there are more classes coming. We know we have the Rune Master, the Falconer, and the Warlock. Is there a particular one of those three that you are most interested in getting into doing build?
Well, for the Falconer, it depends. If it comes out, as I hope to be a full throwing type class, that'll be my favorite class. I'm not a huge fan of curses, or damage over time dots. Like not with the way the game is right now. I feel like hit damage is just more efficient in the game. So to have a really cool throwing class that's built specifically for throwing, better than what we have currently in the lower half, the Forge Guard or Shield Throw or Hammer Throw. I'd really like to see like a class that's meant for axe throwing. I don't know if that's what the Falconer is going to be, but if it is, that would be the one I'm most excited for.
Awesome. What about the Rune Master though? Have you given any thought to Rune Master as far as the play style on that?
I'm curious what they'll do with it. I don't know if it's going to be like a hybrid of the first two. Um, if it's going to be one that could go melee if you wanted, if it's one that's going to go spell if you could. Um, I assume it's going to be some sort of curse or dot or something where it applies ruins that like sort of debuffs to the enemies. But I'm really curious. I almost in my head like I'm trying to think of what it could be and I have no idea. I'm wondering if that's why it's not out yet. Like maybe they're struggling to figure out what they need to put on it or have enough skills for it to be different. But I'm curious what it'll have.
And I know you've kept up with a lot of the news. Are you excited about Dungeons going to being out eventually?
Yeah, it's hard to be. I love dungeons from the games that I played that had dungeons. I have no idea what dungeons in Last Epoch will be, so it's hard to get excited about something that might not be something you like. We haven't got like any details on it, but I don't know if you guys are familiar with like say Lineage 2 was one of the MMORPGs that I love to play. We had what was called daily dungeons, where one time a day you could go into dungeons. You could do it solo, or you could go with party members and you took on a boss that was different depending on your level. So it was kind of a new journey if you'd level up overnight or whatever. But in Last Epoch, it could be just a random boss with different modifiers, and the challenge, beating it that day could give you a unique reward that you can only get that day or that week or from that particular boss. So you have to get lucky enough for it to spawn. And it could be different whether you go solo or in parties, and it could be different for two different parties. They might get two different rewards that day or something, depending on what boss it is that they killed. But in Lineage 2, I really like the fact that it was challenging, and you got better rewards than if you just went out and battled alone for 4 hours.
Nice. What other games have you played then? You mentioned Lineage 2, and we know you play Last Epoch. So besides Last Epoch, Lineage 2, what other games have you played?
Um, Uh, I don't have a whole lot of games on my resume. I usually stick with a game pretty hard once I get into it. But other games that I have dabbled in. I played a little bit of PoE. I played a lot of Diablo 3, a lot of Diablo 2. Um, Warcraft 2 and Warcraft 3 were my favorite games growing up. I love real-time strategy games, tower defense games. Played a lot of modded games with Warcraft 3. Played a lot of StarCraft 2. Um, Yeah, that's about it for playing games. I take a lot of breaks in between those too. Like when I got done playing Lineage 2, when it changed its model to a pay to win instead of just a paid subscription. I think I took a 2 year break from playing any video games at all.
Oh wow. So when you did play Diablo 3, what was your favorite class to play in Diablo 3?
My favorite class in Hammer 3 was the Crusader. I loved the Thorn build. Which if you guys watch my channel, you know that I'm a fan of auto casting and just playing builds that basically just run themselves.
So you like the
But
Lawn Bombarder?
yeah, the Bombarder, the Thorn Retaliation build was epic. I mean, it's been like a couple years since I've even touched Diablo 3, but as I remember it, you were on a horse, you had almost 100%. You tried to get 100% uptime of having your horse summon, and you just ran through, and everything just killed itself. And you'd spam all your skills at one point for the rares and for the bosses. But yeah,
So what about Diablo 2? Which class did you play in that?
ooh, Diablo 2. Hmm, I probably mostly enjoyed the Necromancer in Diablo 2, but the Hammerdin was also one of my favorite builds. But I could never. It seemed like the Hammerdin always got me killed, whereas the Necromancer, I always found a way. Like once I got a couple of kills and got my army risen up, that I always felt tanky with it for some reason. Um, but that was probably my favorite class that I spent the most time on was minions.
Okay.
I know you say you kind of tend to stick with the game. Are you going to be messing with the Diablo 2 remaster?
Very unlikely. Um, yeah, I don't see myself doing it. If I get bored, like right now, where we're in between patches, I might dabble in it. But I have a feeling that by the time that comes out, multiplayer is going to be right around the corner. Once multiplayer comes out for Last Epoch, I don't see myself being able to have any time to dabble in anything else.
Be spending all that time playing multiplayer.
Yeah,
Yeah.
agreed there, and I do believe that it's coming faster than people think. I don't think they would be giving us as much information as they have recently. Fairly
Yeah. I've been really impressed though with DHG and how small their team started off and how far they've come so far with everything. It's been really amazing to see this game grow like it has, and to be able to see people in the community like you, Boardman, who puts out content, and you, Cynical, as well as like Lone Star McFluff and Quiet for Me, all the CTs, Heavy. We had Heavy on here last week for the CT Appreciation Night. He was the only one that was able to make it, which was actually kind of a good thing because by the time we got done questioning him with the slew of questions that I had, we were about out of time. So, I mean, if we would have had two CTs on last week, it would have taken up the whole entire time having two people on. So it was kind of a good thing that we only had one of the CTs. So, Boardman, going back to build guides again. Once your build guide gets created, gets put out, and everything, and you've done double checked it, made sure that it was good to go, has there ever been a time in which a skill has come out that would be better suited for a build that you originally put together and you're like, this new skill just came out, it would be better for this, and you've gone back and revamped the setup afterwards with the new skill?
Oh, sure, absolutely. Just off the top, the best example that I can figure out with that is like the ice range minion for Necromancer. That build was really strong in patch 8.1 and 8.0. They came out with the zombies in 8.2, and the zombies were really easy to add into that build. You just dropped either Rip Blood or Transplant, and now you had this massive amount of ward generation. You had exploding fiery zombies that looked badass. So that was a build that was like a no brainer. Like it was like you got to get zombies into it. It worked really well. It synergized well. Um, but it's the way the game is modeled. There's really it's really hard to say there's a best way to build anything. Like you can almost swap out one skill for another skill in any build. It's just kind of your preference of what you want to do. While there are some that probably have the best in slot, if I went, for example, like the sorcerer, a very old class that's kind of limited, I would say. Nova Boy is probably like the best setup you're gonna get with it. I don't think you could really swap something out on that build and get something better. I think that's a pretty min-max build. But for the most part, with almost any build guide I do, it's pretty open-ended. If you want to switch something out, you can. It will work. I don't know if it'll be better or worse, but I mean, it's just there to show you a build that already works. You'll be in endgame. Swap it out if you'd like. You can try some new stuff. At least learn the interactions that have it at that point, and just go from there.
And this is more of a personal question on my end. How much testing have you put into Infernal Shade? Since I love the skill Infernal Shade, but it does absolute shit DPS for dot damage. What has been the best usage for it? Because the best thing I've used it for so far has been buffing minions, and that's it.
It is a very powerful minion buff, that's for sure. Um, in the 8.3 Necromancer update, I saw that they're changing Dread Shade not to kill your minions anymore, and I'm curious if Infernal Shade will do the same thing. In which case, that will probably be the best route to go with it, unless it sees some other reworks on the other side of the tree. But there are some interesting ways to build. I've never built a build, I've played with it, but never tried to make it the main source of damage. Mostly because I don't like it too much. I don't, it's I don't like the way it jumps from mobs to mobs. You have to have a lot of mobs close by, and then on single target, for me, it's just kind of, it's just, it's just there. So I use it as like a secondary skill with something else that's going to be more damaging. But there are ways to play with it. The last time I used it, the build I put out was a zombie procking build with the marrow shards that just came out a couple weeks ago, where you could, your zombies would blow up, and then when they blow up, there's a chance to proc the marrow shards.
Narrow
There's also a
shards.
chance to proc Infernal Shade, and there was a chance, or 100% chance for them to give you a Vanguard Warrior or Skeleton Warrior or one of the minions. So I just used them as a procking machine, and it was actually a lot of fun playing it that way because they die pretty often, and so Infernal Shades were popping up all over the place without you having to manually cast them. And while they weren't doing a whole lot of damage, they did clear off a lot of the trash mobs for me, so it was kind of a fun play style.
That's been the only playstyle I've had with it where it was somewhat decent, but I had it to where it was set up to explode at the end of the duration of Infernal Shade. So the zombies would go out, explode, put the dot up, and then about a second later they would explode. And it would clear trash, but as far as like boss DPS goes, I noticed an Infernal Shade just doesn't have the boss DPS there. It's just not there yet. And which leads me to my next question: do you think Warlock's going to be able to use Infernal Shade as a main damage source?
That's that's tough. I mean, maybe. I have no idea what it holds up its sleeves. But I assume that there'll be new skills that obviously come when it comes out, and how Infernal Shade matches up with those skills. I don't know. It might synergize with them really well. They do a lot of synergizing now when they implement new skills that buff other skills. So maybe there'll be something in there. I think Infernal Shade just needs like a couple of nodes tweaked around. They do have one in there that allows it to do more damage the longer it's unattached from an enemy. It'd be really cool if they had one that made it do a lot more damage to an enemy the longer it was on it, so that
Mhm.
against single targets you could build it up. But yeah, I'm not sure if it will be a main damaging skill for the warlock. I could see it being in its arsenal, and if it has synergies, being good. But I have no idea.
Hopefully it does. And do you ever have any plans to play in Vision GL's tournaments?
Yeah, I used to play them. and we'll just call it in the ruined era back in the day. And they're a lot of fun. Unfortunately, the tournaments right now take place on days that I work, which isn't a huge thing. I mean, if I have time, but it's really come down to like two major things. One, I have a super busy schedule. You know, I'm trying to put out these guides. I get asked for new videos every day. People wanting either a guide on how something works, a mechanic, a leveling guide, a new build guide, an updated guide, new loot filters, whatever it is. You know, there's always a list of things that like want to be done. Um, Sometimes like like today, there's no YouTube videos on. Today was just like a day to sit back, relax, and just play the game. You know, and just like enjoy it for myself and play some of my favorite builds. But as for joining those, I would probably wait till multiplayer comes out. Just with my history that you guys know about, I just there's no drama that I want, so I just there's no point in even trying to get into them. I'll just wait until multiplayer.
Fair enough. Not a big deal. Do you have any questions?
So, is there a particular skill that you wish was good enough to build around as like a skill that you?
There are a lot of skills that I wish felt a lot more pleasing. Yeah. Some of those would be like I wish Ice Barrage did more damage. I wish you could build into it hitting much harder to where it could just absolutely wreck things and empowered content. Unfortunately, in its current form, it never hits quite hard enough to do that kind of damage. Glacier could definitely see a buff and hit damage. Hungering Souls would be a really cool one if Hungering Souls could hit much harder with the multiple projectiles. It has a really great build and a really good hit damage when it's a single soul that's being fired. But I would love to see Hungering Souls be more of an AOE. You know, being able like my favorite way to play Hungering Souls, like, and I see a lot of people do this. I've seen new players do this on stream. They get Hungering Souls, they go for the more projectiles, and they're like, "Holy shit, that's cool!" They fire out 20 souls, and it takes up the whole screen, and they're homing around, and they're like, "Sweet!" And then they realize they can't hit the same target, and the skill damage just goes to shit, and they're like, "Oh, that sucks." But yeah, there's quite a few skills that I would love to see get a little bit of buff to damage.
Nice.
I've been one of the new players that holy crap put out like 12 this is amazing. Then I sat there and was like, wait, oh no, this isn't good at all. Hold on.
I think we've all done that with Hungering Souls. Yay, multiple projectiles. Then you read it and realize that it can only hit the one target, and it's like, oh, that kind of sucks. Kind of
Yeah.
lead me on there with all the souls spinning around the map going after stuff, make me think that I'm getting multiple hits and I'm not. So I did the same thing too. But going back to Vision GL's tournament, um, we do want to thank the participants, the top three that participated in last week's tournament. Coming in at number one was Tunk. Coming in at number two was Flinter. And coming in at number three is Neo Triz 139. I don't know who that one is. I know the first two. I know Tunk and Flinter. So Tunk puts out the Tunk Labs for people to be able to use to calculate their defenses. And then Flinter is a streamer that streams later on at night. And speaking of streaming times, when do you normally stream, Boardman, so that all our viewers can catch your stream?
Uh, Typically it's Mondays now. That's like in the middle of my days off, so it's the easiest to set up and do. This week I didn't do one. I went to the dentist, so I couldn't talk for a day and a half. But next it's usually just typically Mondays, and typically it's like all day. But
Awesome. So Mondays typically all day. And what's usually your start time that you usually start on those Mondays?
I usually start like 6 or 7 a.m. Pacific Standard Time.
Okay, so that's 6, 7 Pacific. So that's about 10 a.m. my time
Yeah,
on the East Coast.
I would say that's 9 or 10 a.m. on the.
Yeah, yeah. So that's not too bad, man. That's not bad at all. Cynical, did you have another question?
Um, I don't really have another question that I can think of right off the top. Actually, no, take that back. I do have a question. It's a question I like asking everybody that's played the game for a while. I haven't really been playing the game, like playing that long. It's only been like a couple. And I'm going to say, outside of the Monolith of Fate rework, what do you think is the best improvement they've made to the game? From
There's there's been so many improvements over the last 2 years. It's always funny because I'll see people come into Discord, into the main official server, and they'll say, "Has anything changed?" or they'll say this game feels the same, and it's like, how? Like, there is so much new stuff. I don't understand how it feels the same. Like, you haven't obviously played, but I think the biggest, well, for me, what I like the most, um, it's really hard to pick. I'm gonna go with two things. I like the skills. I like the way the skills interact and the new skills. They have so many more options. Back in the day, trees were kind of like, I won't say built for you, but they didn't have as many options as they do now. Now you have like multiple skills that synergize with them. A lot, it's very hard to put 20 points into one because you're like, I need 30 to do what I want. Um, and then the other thing that I really enjoy is the massive amount of improvements graphically and optimizationally, if that's the word I use, for the campaign and the new areas. Like, I'm super excited for Chapter 9. It's been a year since they've released the new chapter. And if you guys look at some of the updates they've done over the last year, like the Edoras Temple and stuff that are like graphically like insane, super excited to see what the new chapter has in store for us.
Yeah, in this patch too, they gave us the new boss too at the temple. So now you got the big guy whose head comes off, and then he starts whipping out and everything, and trying to drop stuff on you. That boss wasn't there before, so that was something new that came out with. And speaking of new bosses, what did you think about Shade of Orbis?
The Shade of Orbis is awesome. Um, I guess that's the third thing that I should mention that's changed. Their boss fights have come miles since before. I mean, back when I first started, you had the campaign. There was no monolith timeline bosses. There was none of that. No arena bosses. So the campaign was your bosses, and this was even before Lagon was even in the story. So like your boss fights were not like overly complicated. There were no time rifts. There was no fire dragon. It was just like Zarok. They were just simple boss fights. And now you have these things that are thematically, you have like Heroit using ice skills on an ice map. It's and like they're very well timed. They're graphically, the mechanics of them are really cool to where you can time them and you can learn them. Usually, typically your first encounter with them, you get really fucked. It's unlikely that you'll survive, but over the time you learn them, and it's really cool that you can learn them and then learn to avoid them and dodge them, time them. As for the Shade of Orbis, yeah, I everyone loves the first time they encounter a boss because you don't know what to expect, and it's cool that with Orbis you can expect that over and over and over again. While some of the skills, kind of like most, like there's like four or five that you feel like you see every time. That's one of his cycling skills. But for the most part, it always feels like at least one new skill is in that fight, and it's like, oh shit, I haven't seen this before. I got to hit the deck or run away. Would definitely love to see some different arenas that you could fight him in instead of always being in the same area. But yeah, it's a pretty cool fight.
Awesome. And what did you think about all the different skills being randomized with him whenever he first came out? That was one of the biggest things I noticed about him as a boss fight was that he did have randomized skills that he could use each time.
Oh yeah, I absolutely love that part of them. Like, as I mentioned, like just that feeling of it being a new fight every time that you go in, not knowing what to expect, keeps you on your toes, keeps you interested, and it keeps your adrenaline up. Especially if you're like in hardcore or something and you don't want to die and you don't know what to expect. There's nothing worse than not knowing what's about to come around that next corner. What's about to be released.
And
The
what do you
the,
think about? Oh,
the shade
go
of
ahead, sir.
Orbis has claimed two of my hardcore. Yeah, and like both times I died, it was like I start the fight with him, like, oh cool, it's blood one. I know how this fight works, and then like you said, he breaks out a skill that I haven't seen him use before. And I'm like, oh, well, guess I'm dead. What are we rolling now?
Or we run into stuff we're not supposed to.
Yeah, we use our movement skill to dash into combat. And then we're like, wait a second, we need to not be here. Oh no.
Like your rip video earlier that I looked at. Oh, it's just the meteor from Shade. It doesn't do any damage. Let me just lunge back in. Oh, I'm dead.
Oh, yes, it does deal damage. Excellent.
Awesome. So, what do you plan on doing in your future with Last Epoch? Do you have any like new content ideas that you're getting ready to start? Like you started the 1 to 75s for leveling guides. Do you have any like newer content that you're working out the details right now and trying to put out?
Um, the not too many things that change too far off the template that I have right now. Currently, when you're at this far into a patch and you're waiting for new content, you kind of get, I won't say like writer's block, but you get a little stuck.
Hmm.
If you've been watching some of the things that I've tried doing, we did the skill talks with Lizard. Like I said, we plan on doing a unique tier list with Lizard. We're gonna put one together where we rank all the uniques, what we'd like to see on them changed. For instance, there's some really cool things. Like you have the two amulets. You have the claw and the fang, and it's basically like a low level leveling version, and then you have an end game powerful version. And there's a lot more uniques that would feel really good if they had both versions, because some are meant for like just leveling, and then they don't have an end game version. And a lot of people say, like, these uniques they suck, and a lot of new players that I see come and say, are there any good uniques that you can actually use at the end game? And there are, but they're more rare, and you have to find them, and some of them are locked behind bosses and such. So it'd be really cool if there was a leveling version, and then every time you can answer like, well, which one do you like? And they tell you just like, oh, you haven't got the end game version of that. Get that, and I bet you it feels a lot better. So I'd like to see a lot more like the Fang and the Claw type uniques that they have.
Awesome. What about you, Cynical?
I mean, yeah, I would love to echo his situation because, especially if they're coming from like a game like Diablo, where like your legendaries matter a ton. That's pretty much all you're using in game Diablo. The whole thing is just legendaries, unique, however you want to term them, and I think adding some more in-game unique are actually usable would like give that awesome feeling back of like, oh man, a unique drop, let me go pick it up. Whereas now like veteran players are just kind of like, oh cool, a unique two-handed hammer, I wonder what it is. Yep, the same one that's already dropped 10 times. Still not good because this isn't good for in-game. So I'm excited for 8.3 to add all those new uniques because it's gonna bring back that rush of like, oh man, an orange drop. See what it is because it's probably gonna be.
Yeah. So when can we expect this new style of content to be coming out with you and Lizard talking about the uniques that are currently available? Is that going to be something you're going to do before the next patch drops, or is that going to be something you guys might look at doing in the middle of the next patch after the new uniques come out?
It's something that will definitely get done before this patch comes out, and then it's also going to be something that will, if we don't just update it, it'll be something that we completely redo every patch. It won't come out day one of patch. Obviously, we'll need some time to play with the uniques. We'll need some time to try the new skills, see the skill reworks. But we found a lot of good reception on those skill tier lists and the unique tier list once we get one out. A lot of people seemed interested in it, so it's something that we'll probably do a pass by once every patch, at some point.
Awesome. And besides doing build guides, you've also said that you covered some of the patch notes whenever they come out too. Whenever new patch notes come out on the forums, do you take and read them and go over them automatically with users already? Like, do you have your stream up while you're doing that, or is that something you usually do offline whenever new patch notes drop or new information's given out, like the dev blog, those sort of things?
When new information is given, typically most of the time new information comes up. I'm not streaming at the moment, so I'll usually just do a video on it and just by myself go over it. They did drop something new just the other day when I was streaming. I think it was last Monday I was streaming. Reimer came in the chat to ask us. I think it was Void Cleave. The nodes for Void Cleave had appeared, and so like when that happens, when something drops while I'm on stream, usually I'll go over it with my viewers, there, and then do a video later. But typically, it's something that I do offline that I just, I might read through it. Sometimes I try and just like do a first time experience where I don't read it yet. I just start recording and I read it out loud. And what I found with that is a lot of times like I'll say something and then like it's actually in the text below it, or like I said something and I guessed at how it was going to work and then it tells you down below and it's completely different. I'm like, maybe I should read it first, figure it out, and then try and explain it to people. But
Awesome. Do you have any other questions you want to ask him, Cynical?
Uh, not that I can think of right now.
All right, awesome. Well, I think that's going to do it for us here today on Last Week at Epoch. I think that's all the questions we've got for our guests. I'd like to thank you guys for tuning in. Boardman, thank you so much for coming on our show and going over your different things that you do within the community. Also, so you guys know, if you're catching us live right now on Twitch, you'll be able to take and catch all of the information at the end of this on the YouTube. We'll actually have it in the description. We'll also have Boardman's link for his YouTube and his Twitch channel on our descriptions for this video whenever it goes live on YouTube. And with that, thank you guys so much for being here that are watching. Everybody have a great night. Thank you again, Boardman, for being here. We appreciate it. You guys have a good one. Take care, everybody.
Yes.